Tuwela. Our dear Dr. Nee is going to be telling us a bit more about, what he views in this process. Nee, please.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. For me, I think an assignment has been made and it's been translated into some questions. I will dare not rewrite the questions, so I try to answer the questions one by one. It says, what do these NTI requirements mean for a new oversight arrangement? For me, it will mean a complete privatization of the DNS, and the proposal will support an MS model, including the directly affected stakeholders, and it should not affect the operation and the policy processes. At the same time, it should not affect the security, stability, and resilience of the DNS. So there should be no change, in my opinion, in the services that are rendered to the global customers and partners for the IANA services. That would be my answer to the first question. The second question is, to what extent must this oversight be more stakeholder? And for me, the process of identifying or defining the oversight need to be multi-stakeholder, but the outcome needs not be. We have to ask ourselves the meaning of oversight or stewardship, but once it's clear to us what that means, if it is, let's say, a last resort to resolve misunderstandings or disagreements of parties involved, as those who directly get services from IANA, then it may be simply appointing the one who determines the resolution. So if it is a judicial entity, then that is that. If it is an accounting entity, then that is that. So depending on what we determine to be the meaning of stewardship, that needs not be multi-stakeholder at all. I think it would be even wrong to consider that. But the process of determining what that entity is, I will admit, needs to be enhanced multi-stakeholder, because there are other groups like IETF and so on that need to play their respective roles. Do major changes put at risk the security, stability, and resilience of the internet DNS? Yes. We have a fairly complex ecosystem, so I would be very careful in touching it, and especially if the definition of the problem has defined certain constants, security, stability, openness, and so on, then I cannot play God and predict what touching an ecosystem will do. An ecosystem is an organic thing, and organic things determine their own balances and so on, depending on their needs and dependencies on each other and the roles. And I think another question is, how does oversight affect openness of the internet? In my opinion, the problem stated was very clear. It should not, and it better not affect it. Otherwise, we're not solving the problem that has been posed to us. On the other hand, in my opinion, changing the openness would disenfranchise this community. The African community needs the openness in order for them to advance. Everybody else has used openness to grow their economies, so dare not change it now. To me, it will seem like after some have used coal to develop their economies, when it gets to the time of Africa, then you say, I have to use renewable energy, and I will not go for that. It has to remain open. It says, where do the RR communities fit into the future model? I believe that they should participate in determining the steward for the process, maybe from time to time. I don't know what will come out, but if need to file a complaint, for example, because things are not working the way Afrinic deems right, then that is another contribution to it. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Nee. So you've heard our panelists. I'm not going to put words in their mouths. And 2 days ago, while roaming with the community, I met somebody who is here in this room and who was saying that he was very much interested in this debate. He comes from the legal side. So I would like to call on our dear friend from Djibouti, Aref. Aref, you've heard our panelists, and I would like to, put you on the spot to tell us what you think about the discussion that is just starting. What do you think the community in this region should do? Going forward in the process, if you have any ideas on how we can do that, that would be great. Aref is the only one that I have right now, but I'm hoping that you can all line up and either have comments or questions from now on, okay? Actually, I forgot one of my panelists, but I'll come back to Pierre. It is just because, he might be able to respond to some of the questions. Thank you. Aref?
Oui. Je suis très.
I'm very much honored to see this excellent panel. The subject that you are dealing with is very, very current. The nature detests emptiness. If there is vacuum in the new technologies, in the regulation of new technologies, in channelizing new technologies, this vacuum will be filled. Either it will be filled by ourselves or by others to our account, and not necessarily in these conditions, and not necessarily in our interest. So it belongs to the Africans to regulate this situation, especially law. The law in terms of new technology is still at the initial level, whereas cyber criminality is exploding in an exponential way. And the problem that may happen is, and this problem is already there in some northern countries in particular, it is the control of everything that is happening through internet or the new technologies of communication. So I'll be very brief in terms of three things that we need to keep in mind, to my knowledge, in terms of cyber criminality. We have to know that all the international conventions that punish the great crimes have constituted a jurisdiction which we can call universal. So consequently, cyber criminality can be judged at the international level. And the problem, it is that if Africans do not take their part in regulating, it is others who are going to do it. The second thing It's like the last speaker said. Sorry, I forgot your name. Just as he said it very well. We have to leave internet open and free, and so consequently regulation cannot intervene. It has to it should not be in advance but after, for a simple reason. Because under the reason that it has to be controlled in advance, we are going to curtail the freedom and the development of new technologies. On the other side, we have to organize ourselves for control at posteriori, after. We don't want states to use this to prevent under so or so reason that you all probably have in mind to hinder the development of these technologies. Third, these controls have to be African. I repeat, these controls need to be African. We are never better served than by ourselves. And here, Africans, whether governors, whether the civil society, whether simple users, or the business world, African business world, they all need to get in agreement to make sure that the problematic be resolved for Africa in Africa. And Africans have the means in terms, with respect to international conventions. I can talk to you later about this. We have the legal means to impose themselves with respect to other continents. But we should never think that the sovereignty, national sovereignty, is sufficient for a state to prevent the development of these new technologies. This states need to understand, and I think they have understood it. And the problem is, we should not either the civil society or the businessmen start thinking that the state is their enemy. To the contrary, the state can help them, and they are condemned to get in agreement. And I think we are all called upon for this. Thank you. Thank you very much, RF.
I am going to go back to something that Tuela said, calling for the internationalization of ICANN and IANA. And I'm going to ask Pierre, given that everybody is saying this whole process, and we're calling for the community, the African community, to be part of this process, what is the future of ICANN on this continent? What are you doing, here to make sure that people appropriate ICANN and, processes that are in the functions of IANA on the ground, for example?
Thank you, Anne Rachel, and good morning to everyone. And to your question, I would say that, the VP for ICANN and for Africa, and this is part of the overall sort of globalization or internationalization of the ICANN. I do have counterparts on the other continents, and in Africa specifically, we are part of what we are calling kind of new sort of engagement that ICANN is having with different, countries and stakeholders. So as far as Africa is concerned, our actually remit is to deliver on what we call the Africa strategy. And that strategy was developed, through a bottom-up approach. It was an Africa working group that designed this strategy for Africa, and the strategy has objectives and line up a few projects. And I'll have opportunity to talk about this later on in the day. So what we do, in fact, is make sure that, of course, Africa participates, and Africa has an informed participation to those discussions. And when it come to the what we are talking about today, which is the transition of the stewardship, I have the, I would just say that maybe we need to do some homework as well as far as Africa is concerned. We, as ICANN Africa, it's a group of, so far, 3 staff members. Although we are actually trying to implement this Africa strategy, most important part of our work also is engaging with the different stakeholders in Africa. And when you mean engaging with different stakeholders in Africa, you are talking about, diverse entities. You are talking about how you actually make sure that government, are part of all of this. Private sector, the industry, the business is not there in Africa, actually. So how do we really make sure that this business is there and thrives? This is also some of the things we are dealing with, and of course, civil society, academia. Now, specifically, my feeling is that, and Tuela said it, Tuela reminded us on some of the principles, and that's quite interesting. She also reflects on some of the concern that Africa is having, and which is good, and these are things that we take into consideration. I was discussing with one of the African ministers recently on this transition, of the stewardship, and some of the things he told me actually echo what Moise was saying. He was saying, well, are we really interested in this thing, when we are dealing with, access and with basic, things, developing the internet in our country. So show me what's our interest in this. Why should we be part of this? Let's just leave others do whatever they want to do, but we are not at that level yet. So you see the problem we have, if you really want to have Africa participate in the debate, how do you make sure that how do you strike the balance, between what Africa is thinking as its basic, priorities and this sort of discussion and globally? I still believe that we need to be part of this, Tuela and the rest. And, but the best way to do this, and to come to your question, and Rachel, I think the best way is to be informed. How are we pushing the information in Africa? Teresa, highlights, the framework that ICANN has put in place to actually have you guys contribute. How do we reflect that in Africa? We do have a resource center actually on this transition phase. So I would say, let's start by understanding, the stakes itself. We have an interesting document that's put up there on the NTI website, and also part of it is on ICANN's website, that really discuss the myth of, the transition. What is it and what is not? I think we need to clearly understand what exactly we are being, asked for here. So I will ask her to get informed. We will do that. But once you are informed, I will finish with that one. There is a key word in the whole thing, which is multi-stakeholder. How do we really translate the multi-stakeholderism in Africa? I've been following the IGF, session in Africa. How would you say that this is a real multi-stakeholder thing? How many governments are part of this? How many private sector people are really, part of this and really think that this is something they should be involved in? So that's what I'm calling, our own homework. How do we build that, multi-stakeholder model in Africa? And one of the things we are doing as ICANN Africa is push the information there, but at the same time highlight, the issues. We are thinking, for instance, of organizing an Africa, what we are calling executive workshop on the transition. We really want to be talking with African ministers, African CEOs, so that they really see why we should be part of the whole debate. And we will also advocate that we do this with the different other stakeholders. Quite good to see Afrinic, has already started, because they are well organized, as LIR. That's good. I would like also to be seeing, our CCTLD people, talk about those things and self-organize. I also like to see Afralo, for instance, for the user at large. So that's the homework. How are we building this multifoldalism, in our, different countries? And of course, ICANN Africa is here to support, those things, but not to impose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Before I go back to one question, I think I have two people lined up there. And Badru, you wanted me to go back to the...
Yes, the slide with the diagrams. No, yeah, that one. So, thanks. It simplifies the whole complicated conversation. And my point was, I think Doctor touched a bit, what's the exact job to be done? Basically, we're looking at that little box, the NTIA, and replacing it, but what are they doing at the moment, clearly for the community to understand? When we actually clarify that very quickly, then we can get the community involvement, because it is very vague at the moment. Because when you talk about it, then we say, what's the concept of control? The next, what is it? What was being controlled and what is not going to be controlled? Clearly defining that. I think the primary thing is the definition of terms. Because when you look at multi-stakeholder, but then in the conversation, there's multi-stakeholder, but no government should be involved. So isn't government a stakeholder? So how do we define what terms and how are they really defined? And I think we need to really get clear on that one, especially if we want to get our community well involved. As Pierre talked about it, I can understand the sentiment of the government because the statement says clearly they shouldn't be involved. How do we break that down to a simpler form that somebody at a different level from us can actually understand it? We in this room might be able to understand it, but if we want a wider view and a wider input, we need to actually start now breaking it down into simple, understandable language that drives the message home. And that's why I like the picture. That, to me, explains it more. And if we can set our talking point around that, I think we can get somewhere.
Sorry, thanks, Badru. Emmanuel?
Oh, yes.
Can you please introduce yourself before you do?
Emmanuel Adjovi, I'm from Francophonie. Je voudrais parler en français.
I would like to speak in French. I find that it is very interesting, this debate that has been started for the contribution of the African community to the debate or discussion that has been launched for the transition of the function of the IANA function. But I would like, I wish to make a proposal of organizing this debate. Sorry, it's not the transition of the function IANA function, Piana. It's the transition of the supervision of the functions of IANA. Sorry, I explained my I was not clear in my statements. I'm sorry. So the idea is the same. The fundamental idea is that in this business, there are questions, fundamental questions for Africa. What are the interests of Africa in this process? And what could we propose that would be in accordance with the fundamental interests of Africa? According to me, these questions can only be discussed if a small group has already worked on this in advance. That's why I would like to suggest here that for what concerns the African community, that a small group, as it was done in the case of the preparation of the meeting of Sao Paulo, that a small group takes these questions, to make proposals to the African community with regards to its fundamental rights, because all regions defend their interests. Our weakness in this process is related to what had been evoked before. Our difficulty in approaching or in implementing the multi-stakeholder model. And so we have a real difficulty. There is a weakness of our governments, a weakness of the presence of our governments, a weakness of the presence of the private sector. The private sector is at its embryonic level. The engines that push this process, the government and the private sector, in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, everywhere, these two actors are not sufficiently present. So we have the feeling that Africa remains the weak chain. So it's very difficult to go back to the process, but for those who are in advance in this process in Africa, can take the file and reflect upon it with regards to the fundamental rights of Africa, and make proposals so that we can move forward. And these proposals should also try to respond to one fundamental question, to which we have not responded in Sao Paulo, and it is the question of the roadmap. The Sao Paulo meeting was not satisfactory to use the diplomatic language in this field. Thank you. Yes, diplomatically. Thank you very much of what you have proposed. What we had put in the subject of this meeting was also how to put in place the accountability of the institutions to move forward. This group that you're asking for example, this vision of the accountability can be a part of this. We can speak about an entity which can be legal or which can be commercial, in the sense that we have the 5 big companies that do the accounting of the world. Is it this kind of mechanism that we would like to put in place in the world? What kind of mechanisms of accountability could we put in place? What concerns the accounts we cannot escape to the legal mechanism. Whatever we think, we are in the face of a common global belonging. It belongs to everyone. We have to thank the United States of America to have put this good at the disposal of humankind. But this is part of our life. But going forward, there's a way of managing these questions at the international level. We cannot escape this the preoccupation, this issue. And today we understand this strategy that strategy of slowing down the debate, because there are interests in this question. There are very big interests. When we look at these interests, we need to take into account also the interests of others. So starting from there, when it comes to accountability, we have to put in place a structure, a legal framework, which I think from this point of view, I go back to the proposals of Toela. This is my personal opinion. Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Paulus, if you will allow me for 2 minutes, I'm going to give the floor to Adiel, who wanted to add one or two things. Adiel?
Yes, thank you. Not add, just clarify what we are doing here. I think it is very important that we, as Badru say, we look at exactly what this process is about. I have here a few words that I want us to really make sure that we are not diverging. Regulation. We are not talking about the regulation of the internet. We are talking about the oversight function of NTIA over IANA function. That is a very specific role. Badru also says something that is not what the NTIA said. The NTIA declaration doesn't say they don't want government in there. No. It has to be multi-stakeholder. Multi-stakeholder involve government. This is exactly the statement in the NTIA declaration. The NTIA will not accept a proposal that replaces the NTIA role with a government-led or an intergovernmental organization solution. That is the two things. It doesn't have to be a government-led or a multi-governmental organization, but a multi-stakeholder solution in which government play its role. I think those are fundamental elements that you have to keep in mind. Going back to the chart that was here, it is that role played today by the NTIA. If that NTIA role goes out, what will happen? What should be there to ensure that the function performed by ICANN, which is the IANA function, is performed properly? That's what we're looking for.
I'm going to go to the floor first, and then I'm going to come back to the panel. Paulus, please. Can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Paulus Nyirenda from Malawi. I'm with the Afrinic board, and I chair the AFTLD. I want also to come back to the issue of our community, the African community, which my previous presenter here alluded to. I want to find out the issue of multi-stakeholder. At the moment, the oversight role, the stewardship, is not multi-stakeholder. So my first consideration is, to what extent must this stewardship, in its evolution, to what extent are we expecting it to be multi-stakeholder? I think that the probably one of the starting points on this would be consideration of the steering committee that is involved or is supposed to be involved in the process. I am not sure if this has now been put in place, but in the proposals that I've seen, I'm concerned that the African community may not be well represented on the steering committee that will lead the process. So I would like to see this addressed. I think NEPAD in their comments, or AU in their comments, look at this. How is our community going to fit in, and how is it going to be involved in the steering process? I think that issues of accountability have been raised. So far, accountability of ICANN is being taken aside as a separate issue to the stewardship transition process. I do not necessarily agree with this, but maybe this is how it is. We will need to sort out as a community how accountable the process is to our community and how accountable the resulting process is to the community. At the moment, the oversight process is not ICANN-based. I think that this issue needs to be taken carefully. The process is ICANN based, and ICANN is an interested party. So it would be a good idea to clarify how ICANN as an interested party will manage a process which will produce an oversight role over ICANN at the end of the process. So this also needs to be looked at in a careful manner. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paulus. I'm going to give the floor to Moaz.
Je vais parler en français.
I'll speak in French. Just to clarify a first point, I did not say that it's not important to follow process, but it's very important not to be taken away from our objectives, which is the development of internet. If today we talk about internet and of this stewardship of the supervision of Rihanna, because there have been leaks about the Americans have had spying on all these networks in the world. It's not by chance that after the telecom conference in Dubai in 2012, where the world was divided in two, there were African countries, including my country, have signed the treaty, but others have not signed it. So this problem of transition have been raised, and governments have given their positions. I can say I belong to the government of the Tunisian government at that time. They gave a position that was controversial compared to what we see or observe today. The Sao Paulo meeting was, I think, a beginning of a very important process for our continent, but we should not forget that our objective is not only to solve this problem of transition, but of developing our internet and to give our societies opportunities that they should seize to develop our economies. Today we are not, we are not in a position to talk about functions and stewardship, whereas we don't have African IPs in the world. We're not developed enough in our societies and our domains. Today there are a number of emergencies regarding domains, and so we should not be taken aside from our objectives.
My name is Fiona Songa. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Telecommunication Service Providers Association of Kenya, and also a Phoenix representative on the ASO and NRO. I think as a region, we need to be able to ensure that we are able to participate in some of these global processes, and that participation should come through even when we're given periods to comment on processes. I think our biggest challenge is that we wait to meet in forums like this. We are ready to give input on the floor, but we are not ready to take time to clearly document our views and our opinions and to share them with the global community on the platforms that have been presented to us to use. I think we have a lot of opportunities to be able to be involved, whether as academia, private sector, government, whatever part of the multi-stakeholder arrangement you represent. The doors are open. There is room for you to give your views and your input, because ICANN is not going to be able to move forward unless it is clear that there is a multi-stakeholder regional balanced involvement in the transition process. If the US government is ready to hand over to, are we going to be do we want to be part of the group that will be involved in the managing and oversight process of the IANA function? That is a question we need to ask ourselves, and if so, how do we want to do it? Because there's been there's been a period where comments were asked for, and when you look at the comments, everyone is saying our participation is low. But why is it low? Because we as individual Africans are not putting in our time to share our views. We are very quick with each other on our Afrinic mailing lists. My hope is that the same energy can go into the discussion on this very important global process that will have an impact on us as a region, whether we agree to participate or not, because I think we have a level of the way the global community is handling things at the global level, we have a level of deciding whether we want to be in on or not. It's not that we don't have the views, we have the views. There are a lot of African views in this room right now, but we are shy for one reason or another in putting them forward. I want to challenge every African in this room to please pull up your socks. Let us style up and let us please participate in the process, especially the open processes that do not necessarily require the views of, say, Afrinic as an organized structure, or AFREN or FTLD, views you can give in your own individual capacity, please table them, because those are the views that consist of our views as an African region. I want to support Emmanuel's proposal. If we could have a small group of people in the community who are working on this, it would be very helpful. Last year, I was involved in the ICANN accountability and transparency process, and it was very difficult to collect views from the region. And that is why this time I'm saying, hey, we need to style up, because we are not so keen on giving views on such broad topics. But I think we need to be able to present our opinions, our views as individuals and as a community, to make use of the opportunities available, because if we don't, then we risk being left out by choice. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Anybody on the panel wants to respond? We've had two people from the floor right now who have offered this idea of let's have a group who can drive the discussion. I am hoping that, you know, some of the panelists can respond to that. Plus also, I heard Nii say the process can be multi-stakeholder, but the end result may not need to be if we can actually have something there that can be accountable to the community. So I want you to keep that in mind, and let's hear the rest of the floor, and I would like my panel to comment on that. Sewun, introduce yourself, please.
Okay, I'm Seun from